Hello, church family. As you can see, I'm in the foyer, and it's Wednesday night, so hopefully you'll be here and come on and worship with us. But I actually got a simple but lovely word for us today, and that's going to talk about trusting God. Trusting God. You know, I remember I was speaking with one person about my issues a few years back, and he said the problem is you don't trust God. And as much as we say it so easily, I trust God, it's actually one of the hardest things to do because most of our worry and concerns always roots in not being able to trust God. And I want to talk about the characteristics of God and then talk about one of my favorite people in the Bible. You know, God is a sovereign God. He's an all-powerful God. He's an all-seeing, all-wisdom. He's a merciful God. He's an all-loving God. I mean, he sent his only begotten son to die for us, even though we were yet sinners. And he's a faithful God. He's a God that cannot lie. So who do you want to put your trust in? Now, I can go on with so many more about he's a jealous God or how he just, he does things for his own glory, his own will, and he chooses to use whoever he wants. But let's look into a story of a character. His name starts with a J. No, it's not Jesus. I'll give you the next one. O. No, it's not Job, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. I actually want to talk about Joseph. So the book of Joseph, well, it's not a book, but the book inside of Genesis, it really does a great job of displaying so many characteristics of God, despite how it looked on the outside. So if you know about the story of Joseph, it starts off with Joseph, one of the sons of Jacob, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. One of his sons, and this is the one that Jacob actually favored. And because he favored, the other brothers kind of felt jealous and eventually hated him. So one night, God blesses Joseph with a revelation that he's going to be this great ruler and people are going to bow before him. And Jacob, being young and naive, goes out and splurs this information to Jacob and his brothers devise a plan to kill him. So in the midst of that, as they're going out into wherever they went to, his brothers despised, we're going to kill our brother. But God's sovereignty kicked in and they said, you know what, let's not kill him. Let's send him into slavery. So he is captured as a slave from the Ishmaelites and he's sent into Potiphar's house. Now, when you hear the word slave, I've never read in history where being a slave is a good thing. But when you're in the will of God, God can cause what was meant for your evil for good. And he became a slave in Potiphar's house, but then God spoke to Potiphar because he's all sovereign and all knowing. And Potiphar saw the favor that was on Joseph's life. So even though he was a slave, he was living like a son in his king's house. So he put Joseph, had him steward over everything, the cattle, the home and everything, but he did not give him anything to do with his wife. And speaking of wife, Potiphar's wife, who we all know about, she took a liking to Joseph. And the Bible teaches that she continuously came after him, trying to make him to sleep with her. But you see, Joseph was a man of God and knew that despite how blessed he was never going to turn on Potiphar, let alone God. So it got to the point to where, the devil's always going to try to mess things up. And one time she literally grabbed him and grabbed his cloth and he ran away. And mind you, he never decided to go back and tell Potiphar, your wife is trying to sleep with me, because he understood he could trust God and do what is right. Well, you know what happened. She lied and said he tried to rape her. And guess what? That landed him in prison. Once again, he's trusting God and now he's in prison. And most of us, if we were doing what's right and it landed us in prison, we would probably question what is God doing, but God knew exactly what he was doing. He's all understanding. So now he's in prison, but guess what? The hand of God was on him as well. And when he was in prison, God caused him to have favor with the guards. So guess what? He was in there, not living as a prisoner, labeled as a prisoner, but he was living as a messenger and a servant of God. And then his gift, which was to interpret dreams, started to manifest even more and more. As you continue with your journey following God, he will use you in ways, in places you would have never imagined or dreamed. So what ended up happening is he started interpreting dreams for people within the prison, and word started spreading around. Matter of fact, at one point, Joseph put his trust in a guy that got released from prison, but as soon as he got out, he forgot. And there's a teaching right there. When you put your trust in people, places, government, science, whatever, anything above God is going to eventually fail you. But guess what? God was sovereign over that because God knew the time that Joseph was going to be released from prison, that was going to call him into his ultimate calling. And that was the calling that he gave him when he was a young man. And Pharaoh started having troubling dreams. and nobody could interpret. But then somebody who knew Joseph said, oh, I know a young man. He's a prisoner, but desperate times calls for desperate measures. And Pharaoh called for Joseph, and Joseph was able to interpret the dream. And when he interpreted the dream, it caused Pharaoh to love him and like him so much that he said, you'll be second amongst all. And just like that, the very word that a faithful, all-sovereign, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-understanding God did came to pass. But it doesn't end there. Because of this, you would think of, man, those 20 plus years that Joseph was estranged from his family. You see, we serve a God that everything that happened in our past or things that we can't change, he can make it up to you. And his very brothers who wanted to kill him, his father who was estranged from him, they came back into him in a way where you would have thought, okay, Joseph's going to get revenge. But no, we serve our own merciful God. And God's goal while walking with us is to make us Christ-like. And Joseph displays it so well when he's met up with his brothers. He doesn't take his wrath out. He had every reason, every power to, but he let them know, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. He embraces his brothers, never tells his father what his brothers did, and they live, I'm going to say happily ever after, but that's more Disney-like. But you guys get what I'm saying. If you go, I really, really challenge you to go back and read the book of, read the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, if you're struggling trying to trust God in this season right now. Because God's ways are not our ways, but he's sovereign over everything. And you can use Abraham, Moses, David, you can use whoever you want. And you will see how God works, but it all comes down to you trusting him. Trusting him. And when you trust him, he will bless you and show you that what the enemy meant for bad, he'll use for good. God bless, church family. I hope this was a blessing to you. Now remember to trust God no matter what. Take care.